and make sure I have everything ready to go.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Raylene.
Yes.
We don't. Hey, Jill, can you scroll down on the agenda just to the first or second item? I just want to see what we have coming up. Okay, so we have Brian's. That's not a voting issue. Is that correct? Either.
Yeah. Yes. It's just a slide deck on how we talk about mental health.
Okay, and then the next item is the committee's reconfiguration and focus, and that is going to be led by Peter. Peter, are you here today?
I am here, and Heather will be joining us. I don't see her on the call yet. Since we've already addressed this in both behavioral health and legal and justice, we're going to talk about a few other items that are related to this. And so I'm expecting we're probably talking about 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. And then the fourth item is the ordinance and the Justice Project implementation plan. That's a continued discussion from February's meeting, and then the annual report. Jill, does that cover everything?
Hey, Peter.
Yes, I believe so. And it looks like we do have a quorum for both committees now.
Okay, sounds good. Raylene, do you want to do the land acknowledgement statement, and then I can just call to order the first agenda item. Does that sound all right?
Excellent.
Okay, let's do it.
Good morning, everybody. This is the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force Joint Behavioral Health and Legal and Justice Committees. It's 11:32 on June 11th. I'm going to begin with the land acknowledgement statement. Before we begin, we acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in covering truths at any and all public events. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you, Raylene. This is Dan Hamill. I'm the co-chair of the Behavioral Health Committee for the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force. Calling this meeting to order. Thank you for the land acknowledgement statement, Raylene. The first item that we have is framing adversity, trauma, and resilience, and this is presented by Brian Estes.
Jill, can I share my screen?
Jill, are we able to do the share screen for Brian?
He should. You have a capacity to share screen, Brian, or did you want me to do it? I have your document pulled up and ready to go.
Well, no, it's a slide deck. So I'm just trying to get rid of this. There we go. Can you see that?
Not yet.
Okay, sorry. I'm just not sure how to share this for some reason.
You'd think that after 4 years of doing this, we'd all be experts by now.
Well, I'm using a Mac and I don't normally use a Mac. So do you want to go to the next agenda item and we'll come back to this when I figure it out?
Is it right on your bottom bar where it says right next to the hand raise button? It's has a share screen button.
It opened up. Okay, there. All right. Do you see that? No. Did I leave?
Brian, the other option is if you want to send that slide deck to Jill or we can share for you.
Okay, I'm just, let's see here. Yeah, let me do that. Why don't you go on to the next item and I'll send a PowerPoint over to you. All right, sorry.
That's okay. I'm going to turn it over to Peter Frazier then. And we're going to discuss the IPRTF and committees reconfiguration and focus. And then if we need to stop in between because we've got the other stuff figured out, let me know, because I think your presentation is going to take up a lot of time that we want to focus on, unless Peter has other thoughts on that. But I think that's where we should start with. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Raylene. Let's see, this is an item, a couple items that Heather Flaherty and I will be presenting today. We've been in the co-chair position for a few months now, and the reason that we're going to be drifting a little further away from the agenda item as it's written is that we've already addressed these issues in both behavioral health and in legal and justice. So everybody has an idea of the direction we're headed and such, but Heather and I have been doing some more granular thinking about about the issues that we would really like to tackle over the next year or so, and so we'd like to present those today. And then also, since we have a gathering of these two groups into one body, I'd really like to ask the question and go around and get feedback from all of you on what are the issues that come to mind that this specific body is uniquely qualified to address. Now, as you know, I'm relatively new to the IPRTF, and so I have not been joining these meetings for much longer than about 6 months. So a lot of you have been around and in this configuration of these joint meetings, and you know what you've been addressing. What is it that these two bodies together can address specifically better than any committee by itself? And looking ahead to the next year, let's say, what sort of issues come to mind as those that this body in particular should be addressing? So I'd like to start there and perhaps start with Raylene. Raylene, do you have some thoughts on that issue?
Yes, thank you, Peter. Some things that I've noticed recently is there's a lot of changes in staffing and membership. As I look at the Legal and Justice Subcommittee, Darlene Peterson has been on the subcommittee and she is retiring. And I don't know that there's a replacement there. The small cities where I was representing has, I believe, Chief of Ferndale is stepping in, but I don't know that he's on that subcommittee, and there's not a representation from the small cities other than that. So we need to look at representation there. I know Faith is retiring this year, and she is the court administrator for the municipal court in Ferndale. I know Tammy Graham is retiring after over 20 years with the municipal court in the city of Linden. Like I said, there's been a lot of changes, judge changes in the municipal courts. Tom Lydon is now the judge for Everson, Sumas, and Blaine, and has been helping out in Linden, as I believe Terry Lewis will be retiring soon as well. So with all of these changes and staff changes, For the municipal courts of limited jurisdiction, Bruce is also a member of the IPRTF, but he has been on the Legal and Justice Subcommittee. He's also retiring in July. So there's a lot of different staffing changes, and to get representation from the people that are on the ground doing the job. Those are some of the things that we probably need to look at moving forward. I know even in Superior Court, Stephanie and I are still in the middle of separating things and doing different sections that we're looking at for the Division of Superior Court. And she is working on the pretrial services and juvenile courts. And so there's things that I think we should be looking at program wise, what we can do, what we can't do, what we can manage. And, you know, I've reached out a little bit to look for a potential replacement to or co-chair to assist me and the Legal and Justice Subcommittee. And so far, that's been vacant, but you know, I'm hopeful that there'll be somebody that'll be able to step up, and maybe if we can get some new membership. But I think moving forward, you need to look at who's on those committees and who else we need to recruit. That would be a starting point for me. Thanks.
Very good, Raylene. Thank you so much. And we'll definitely take note. And if there's anything I can do to be helpful in your recruiting or any of us, please reach out. Arlene, you've been with the IPRTF for some time. What thoughts do you have on the matter?
Well, we should have representation from people with lived experience. So I don't see anyone here. If you are, speak up. Also, I don't know about the history and background of the people who are joining us now, and I would like to know that. But it's not as important as certain other issues. I think it's very important for us to be able to let the public know what has been accomplished and what is going to be accomplished. So I have always supported a very big program towards informing the public. Very often they don't know what we're doing, and they should.
Very good. So I hear a call for greater communications for understanding the background of new members, and also making sure that we have folks with lived experience on these committees. And Maya, I see your hand up.
Everybody, I don't know if this speaks directly to the conjunction of the Behavioral Health and Legal Systems Committee being a joint committee, but I mean, issues, if you're looking at what's on the horizon, what do we need to be addressing to reduce incarceration in Whatcom County, then we are going to need to be talking about funding public defense to meet the new standards that are impending from the Supreme Court. That's going to be a seismic shift, and it's going to require a lot. And I mean, I know it's budget cycle right now, and you know, the counties out there's always talk of the need to compress, and there's no room for growth because there's financial constraints. But like this is going to be critical to our system functioning, and people not going unrepresented in our jails and in our community, which will delay. And I mean, it'll just damage trust in the system. There's so many problems if people are going unrepresented, that I think that has to be a #1 concern of this whole committee. But then secondary to that maybe is the promotion and creation of prosecutor-led diversion programs, and the need for that, because we have to we need to grow the system to meet new standards, but we can also shrink the system by removing cases and not filing cases. And the community is asked, you know, I think would prefer that be done through diversion and the provision of services rather than just not filing certain cases. But somehow there needs to be a reduction of the influx. So those are the sort of top things that I'm seeing and thinking about all the time.
Very good, Maya. Thank you very much for that. And on the first matter, in the near future, I don't know when the determination is going to be coming down from the Supreme Court, I believe it is. But do you see utility in our talking about the issue before we find out what it is that they're going to determine?
Well, they're opening for comment. There's going to be a comment period and two public meetings where the public can comment.
Mhm.
And I think it'll close in October. So I think there should be some, whatever this, if this body wants to give comment, then someone will have to guide that.
I
And
see.
so yeah, I think it does make sense because there hasn't been a decision made, and there should be some analysis of the effects. And I think the exec's office might be doing some, there should be some feedback given.
Very good. Thank you. Raylene, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Just to echo some of Maya's concerns, even if this doesn't go through, which I find that parts of it are most likely going to be approved, but I don't know that. That's up to the Supreme Court. And we're still struggling with finding conflict counsel and being able to pay them at a reasonable rate. I mean, we've done way better in the recent area, and I think I've only got just a couple people currently that are unrepresented. I was able to find attorneys, but the rates aren't cheap. And I don't know if any of you have been following what's going on in Oregon, but it is definitely something that we should look at. They're close, and the appellate court just affirmed a ruling releasing defendants from jail who don't get public defense. The Oregon's public defense system is failing, and they're saying that these people have to be released from custody, and they're looking at steps that have been taken. They had 3,200 people that did not have a public defender, and 146 of them were in custody. And these aren't individuals that there's a concern for safety. It's not just a petty offense that they're looking at. There's people accused of rape, kidnapping, strangulation, assaulting a police officer. These are individuals that have serious crimes, and it's not just being able to pay the public defense. I mean, it's costly. It's going to be costly for the county to find these attorneys, but it's also finding attorneys that are qualified to take these types of cases. Not every attorney out there is qualified to take some of these serious cases, which makes it a bidding war to find conflict counsel when the public defender's office can't take it because there's been so many conflicts. So we are looking at other options on diversions and seeing what we can do. I spoke with Eric Ritchie earlier this month on some other solutions that we're hoping that we can look at, but I'm not in the position to tell the prosecutor what to do or the public defender what to do. What I am in the position is making sure that people are represented because I oversee the Office of Assigned Counsel and currently the Conflict Counsel. So those are things that, whether or not the Supreme Court ruling happens or not, is something that we should take very seriously, because if people don't have counsel, cases lag on because they can be recharged if the charges are dismissed. Eric Ritchie might have a few more comments on that, but I am concerned, and I appreciate Maya bringing it up.
Very good. Thank you, Raylene. I'm looking for, on the participants list, folks that have been on this body for some time. Brian Thane, is there anything that you'd like to add? Okay, not hearing Brian. Dan Hamill.
I see Brian unmuted. Brian, did you want to say anything?
Sure. I hate to kind of pile on Raylene's starting comments. I'm retiring next month. I'll be stepping down from this committee. I also echo Arlene's concern for communication with the public about what we're doing here.
Very good, Brian. Thank you very much. Dan Hamill?
Yes to everything that was just said in terms of all the items that were brought up. Well, on behavioral health, we're facing the same challenges as legal and justice. We are having people step down because of retirement, because they are positioned going into private practice, what have you. And I am actively recruiting. I have 4 irons in the fire, so to speak, on new members, and my goal is to bring in folks that work in the fields that we are currently discussing, whether they are police, fire, behavioral health folks, to bring them into the fold. And to your question, Peter, about like in terms of what's the overlap or what are we sensing the priorities are. So I would say interdiction, PETA continuum, prevention, intervention, treatment, aftercare, recovery. When it comes to the fentanyl crisis that is currently has its grips over the communities that we live in, I think getting some. We've had our state ledge folks come and talk to our committees. I think continuing that discussion and what it looks like to not only team up and make recommendations with the county council, but also look at the broader team of state legislators and the cities, not just Bellingham, but small cities as well, to understand what those needs are. And I agree 100% with the communications piece. I don't think we tell our story very well. That's been a chief complaint of mine since I started 10 years ago in government, is that we need to talk about our successes and our challenges. So I echo the comments that were made by the earlier speakers. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Eric Peterson, would you like to, I believe you've been on this committee for some time. Are there any observations, thoughts that you'd like to share with us? Okay, I'm going to move on to Stephen Gockley.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Eric,
hi, Eric.
was muted.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Eric.
Yeah, I don't know. I've probably been on here about as long as you have. I know I've been on the task force for a while, but not on this small committee for quite some time. So I like what Dan said, some of the priorities. I also agree that, you know, what Maya had said about public defense, people need to have representation. So, you know, if we can focus on those things, that'd be great.
Very good, Eric. Thank you so much. And back to you, Stephen.
Thanks, Peter. I don't disagree with anything anybody else has put forward so far either. I took your question to be directed at sort of topic focus, and just from the foggy past, the reason for having joint meetings was we were seeing increasing areas where there were both behavioral health treatment concerns and the mix with the criminal legal process focus that the Legal and Justice Systems Committee was dealing with. So we were trying to talk together about those overlapping things. And so what I would say is I think there are some pretty clear focuses amongst the projects in the implementation plan. I'd like to be that concrete for our work, tracking those. So what I see is there is behavioral health treatment going on in the jail and in the community. That's clearly a system that we need to address. There's reentry preparation activity going on in the jail, and we hope to build more in the community. That's another one. The MAT, substance use treatment in the jail, and the capacity to perform that in the community is critical. And the more we want to divert, like the prosecutorial diversion program, the more we want to divert out of the legal and justice system requires a capacity to handle alternative approaches in the community. I don't think we have the capacity in our community treatment systems and service systems. And that's sort of a commonality throughout the implementation plan projects. I think we need to get on that right away. I'm like probably a lot of other people on the committee, a little dismayed at getting some traction on getting going on some of those projects. So I think the more we can kickstart some of that, or be the squeaky wheel in some of that in a polite way, the better. I guess that's what I'd say at this point.
Very good. Thank you, Stephen. I am realizing now that the document we circulated a couple months ago to these groups, taking the projects of the implementation plan and distributing them through the different committees. I did not go and make a section for this joint committee. And so I'm going to review that, and we'll get back to everybody on thoughts, proposals around that. Brian, you've had your hand up.
Peter, are you entertaining sort of structural changes with the way the committees do business right now, or is it just more topics?
Absolutely, both.
Well,
I mean, I think that from the last 3 months of meetings, that's really what we're trying to get to, not just topics, but also process, bias towards action. How do we change our structure? How do we change our process to do more?
well, we had talked in an earlier behavioral health committee about trying to become more action oriented, and I would like to see us continue that. And perhaps as a committee, if we had some subgroups that were working on specific, issues, maybe the committee only would need to meet every other month. And we would take that time and like focus on some reentry programs, or have 3, 4, or 5 program policy areas where we want to specifically see us develop actionable items, say this year or in a calendar year, and to change kind of like we said earlier, to become more action oriented. So I'd like to see that. And perhaps a joint meeting like this, I'll just be honest, maybe every quarter, not every other month. I don't know. But if law and justice similarly is working on things when they intersect between law and justice and behavioral health, it would make sense for us to have a joint meeting. So I guess I'll just stop there, and I'd like to see us focus on 3 or 4 specific policy program areas that are actionable, because if not, I just think it's very educational, but at the end of the day, what do we want to look back a year from now and say that this committee has accomplished? So I'll leave it at that.
Very good. Thank you, Brian. Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, I tend to agree with what Brian just said in terms of wanting to be more action oriented. I just, as a reminder, and for folks that are new to this process, these committees have generated in some way, shape, or form the GRACE program. We contributed to the LEAD program, alternate response team, which is a behavioral health crisis response model, and Deacon Center for Hope. The list just goes on, and that stopped about, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago. Maybe it's because all the low hanging fruit was plucked from the tree. But I think that we need to get back to that, and it's harder now. The things that we are addressing are more and they're longer term. And I'd like to make sure that we have in our thinking how these two groups can work on the Division Street property in terms of providing some feedback, working collectively with Whatcom County Health Department, City of Bellingham, to provide for a behavioral health campus that includes the Ann Deacon Center for Hope. And there are many things that need to be corrected with that center. This is how it rolled out, was not what we envisioned. I can assure you of that. We have other things that I'm not gonna go into because the deals are not signed yet. But we have very good news coming up when it comes to improvements on that at that subject parcel. And then the other thing that we're not talking about here is and I guess we'll get to it here at some point, but how do we roll out the important components of the jail facility and attendant behavioral health and housing and all the things that will make people be more successful and not recidivize back into the system. I think that if Peter, if you're looking for topics or structural things that we need to discuss, I think those are the two large animating pieces for me that we need to be talking about. So I'll just stop there, but that's where I'm at right now. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Arlene, I'm going to hold you for just a moment. I want to get to Eric Ritchie. You've been on these calls or in these meetings for many years. I'd love to hear your observations on what issues that we should be tackling, particularly with this committee or combined committee, and also any process changes that you would like to see.
So I kind of like the way Brian put it at the end, where he said we need some policies where we can have some actions, and you know, I mean, that just makes sense. We spend a lot of time talking about things that are educational, and you know, I think help informs our community about what we do generally. But boy, some action items would be fantastic. And the biggest action item that I think that we need to be addressing is what do we divert to? You know, so we need a program, we need some mental health, we need some drug addiction treatment. We just need a place to divert to. And, you know, how that's formed, how that looks, you know, I think that's up to our community. And I look forward to being part of that process.
Thank you very much, Eric. And Heather, would you like to join in here?
The one thing I've been thinking about, all the topics, yes, of course, honing in on what we discovered during the stakeholder advisory process of that overlap of who is in the jail and why, and who is experiencing that overlap of substance use disorder or behavioral health needs. Can we reduce that population safely, as is the charge of the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force? Yet very much yes, diversion too. And moving to action in that, but appropriately, because what's interesting is that we're structured as an advisory body to county council, which means we give advice on action, or how are we moving really well and thoughtfully from advice to we're all actually doing something within our roles and abilities. And I'm curious too, for the county staff, especially, who a lot of the implementation and action falls to, all of you who are frontline and doing this work, what is helpful from a committee like this for you, so that you don't feel like you're just coming and reporting the same reports? Because I know this probably isn't the only place you come and report either. So just that sweet spot of how do we not get in each other's way, keep the information and action organized and helpful and productive, honor the county's role in implementing much of that justice implementation plan. And that is a real question. If anyone wants to weigh in right now from the county team, what is helpful from having a group come together like this to you?
Great. Thank you, Heather. I would encourage Jill or any other staff that are from the county who would like to speak to what Heather just brought up, to bring it up now, I think that'd be great. And also I have a reflection, Dan. You were recounting all the many things, action items, if you will, that came out of projects that came out of this, out of the IPRTF. And do you see something about how that process rolled out that could be reinstituted? Or so I'd love to hear from Dan, Jill, anyone else from county, and then we're going to get back to Raylene and Arlene. Arlene first and then Raylene.
Yeah, I really want to answer your question because I'm disagreeing with some of what has been said, although it's not impossible to do both. I discovered that that when we meet all together, people change. And how do they change? They hear stories or some information that makes them change. And so I've observed that even people who didn't necessarily want everything that we have on the justice plan, they've changed their position from resisting it to wanting it. They influence each other. So it's very important for us to know each other and to able to advocate for these things. Otherwise, we're a bunch of strangers talking. And we used to meet in person at the very beginning, and that was quite good. I think the group meetings are very powerful, and the power is to change the world that we have. We want that. How do we accomplish it? We affect each other and inspire each other and change our minds. So I'm coming from the behavioral health point of view, of course, but I can't help looking at it like that.
Thank you, Arlene. Before I get to you, Raylene, I'd like to give space to any county staff who would like to speak. All right, Raylene, what do you have?
Thank you. You know, something that I see is with any action item, anytime we try a new program, we're diverting stuff or we're looking at other options, what we can do, it takes somebody to administrate those programs and it takes money. And the county is going to have to figure out how to fund things and what we're doing with the ARPA positions. And so there's the ideas of, yes, we want to do these things. Well, where's the money going to come from? And can we get legislative funding? And how can we support these programs that we want that aren't impacting all the taxpayers? We just had a huge ask for the new jail that's coming forward, and property taxes are going up, and the county is not going to have enough money to pay for all of these different programs, even though they're important. So as I looked at the presentation that was in the beginning of this meeting that we will get back to, is we have to look at how can we look at funding these action items? How can we look at funding the re-entry? How can we do diversion programs without the money from the county directly? Is there other ways to get those that funding to actually administrate it? And do we have the bodies to fill those positions? And when we build these healthcare centers, we want restoration, but do we have the staffing and the needs to meet those requirements? As I looked at, you know, the presentation on the restoration and competency, and we want stuff in the outside that's not incarcerated, but they have to focus on the incarcerated first. And then they can go outside. And that waiting list is so long that these people are reoffending and it's causing more problems. So it's a cyclic problem. So unless you can find the staffing and the funding to get the staffing and get the people here to do the job, we're just spinning in circles. And the other thing that really hasn't been a focus on this group is juveniles. And what we can do to help juveniles before they enter the criminal justice system, because that's just gonna amplify current problems if we can't help them when they're young.
Thank you, Raylene. Would anybody else like to speak on this topic?
Well, I'll chip in. Mike Hilly from EMS. Sorry I didn't hand up. I beat you there. Sorry.
You're good, Mike.
Yeah, no, this has been an interesting area for me as it's related to EMS and how this intersects. And I'll say I've been on the committee since early 2019. And I came on the committee because the fire chiefs just really didn't see a reason for them to be there. And I don't think they really understand how some of that work intersects with this particular group. However, I disagree a little bit. When I first got into this, it was strictly with the Behavioral Health Committee. And when it was just the Behavioral Health Committee meeting, it was easy for me to wrap a lot of these topics that, are problematic in EMS, such as, the overdose problem, people coming out of jail, not on MAT and dying, recidivism with the emergency department, and no place to send them if you want to divert, etc. But when we combine the two groups, and I'm not saying split them up at this moment, I totally get it. But when we timed the two groups, it definitely became, incarceration prevention centric, law enforcement centric in those conversations. However, as Council Member Hamill points out, there was a long inventory of great things that came out of this, or both these committees that got a lot of things going. So I'm not suggesting we split that back up. But for me, it's how all this intersects with EMS. And the MAT thing is important to keep people out of jail. Once again, in the last, month or so, all of you heard the story about Evelyn's son dying upon his release of jail and not being able to get into his MAT program. People that are may arrested maybe for a drug type of thing go straight to jail, and there's really no in-between place to make sure they're not going to suffer from the withdrawal aspect of that. But I think the new Justice Center offers a place for all that stepping up, or places that EMS could divert in these diversion things along with law enforcement. I think some of the most important work, though, is a little bit out of the prosecutor's office as related to the 24-hour, 72-hour holds. And in increasing that availability to hold. Right now, we have to wait till people are ready to kill themselves before we can put a hold on them, or actually have the attempt to put a hold. When you were progressively watching a patient patterns develop into that. And so, we talk about this in our community paramedic meetings as well. Right now, we're struggling just to meet the most frequent users of the system. But how do we get people not to be frequent users, which is to catch them early in that process? So those are just my general observations moving on with this group, and I think how the new Justice Center will help with all this. But yeah, here it is 6 years later, and we're still not diverting. Still don't have MAT. We haven't really solved some of these mental health issues out there. Our team has taken a great load off the police department. That's been great work. But once again, what's the next steps? And so that's what I think about daily, just from an EMS perspective and how all this intersects. So.
Don't you expect the crisis clinic to take the drop-offs?
Yeah, at the moment, so the Ann Deacon Center is just not working for drop-offs. So we can't achieve the 15-minute drop-off. However, I do know that the county's received funds already for the 23.5 hour. Obviously, that's going to take several years to get up. And so from my perspective, what can we do in the meantime to at least divert the OD problem? And
it should be terrific for catching everything. And that's why we have to oversee the planning in some way, because it needs to cover everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess for my little world or piece of it is that I'm hoping that we're going to be able to set up this temporary opioid diversion center, low barrier for those patients that choose to take MAT in the field. And they may not go to recovery that day, but at least we can clear their head up a little bit, have the conversation for those 40% of the people that don't go to the hospital when we wake them up after an overdose. And if we can prove that that model is working, in fact, Seattle is setting that model up right now. I think they're a couple of more months out on the actual center, but they are delivering MAT in the field and they're catching some of that and able to divert. But for us, if we stand this up in the next year, we'd be able to demonstrate a diversion project that could be integrated into that 23-hour center. So that's kind of what's in the conversation mold right now with the health department in my office. So, yeah.
Very good, Mike. Thank you so much. And Dr. Wu.
So I really appreciate the input. There's so much there that I support. But getting back to your original question about what's specific to this joint meeting, I'll say this is my first joint meeting. So I'm just talking from a lack of experience, but my observation here is analogous to what we experience in medicine. Periods of great risk are when you transition between systems. So when you're being admitted to the hospital, and especially when you're being discharged from the hospital, are times when things can go terribly wrong, but also when well done can make a really important difference in avoiding readmissions and recycling through the system. So it seems to me that this joint committee seems naturally positioned to focus on those transitional moments when a decision is made. Are we going to divert? Are we going to incarcerate? What facility are we going to go to? And then again, on exiting the system, what's the plan so that it's going to go smoothly and we're going to avoid recidivism? In medicine, changing referral patterns and changing patterns of sort of habitual work patterns is very challenging. And what we've found in our experience is that if you want people to do the better thing has to be easier than the way it used to be. If the better thing is harder to accomplish, then the old pattern tends to win out every time. For the client in this case, the old pattern is very easy, it's seamless, and it's immediate, which is that whoever's dealing your drugs will meet you where you are and deal you your drugs and give you a free supply to start with. We have to be at least that good, I think, to be successful, or at least close to that good with the offering of something that has the potential to be long-term better. I also like Arlene's point, which is that in this joint meeting especially, I hardly know who anybody is or what they do as a new member, and that does make it more difficult. A minimal thing we could do is just put our affiliations and what we do in our name. That would help a little bit. And the other thing, I look at the makeup of the people in this meeting, and I don't know what everyone's ethnic, racial background, life experience is, but I would venture a guess that we do not reflect the population we're trying to serve. And I think nitty-gritty, granular information from people who have been through this would be really helpful at coming up with concrete, actionable ideas.
Thank you, Dr. Wu. I appreciate it. And Stephen Gockley, I think we'll get a comment from you, and then I want to get back to Raylene and our other items. So, Stephen, go ahead.
Thanks, Peter. I was thinking about Dan's comment about the accomplishments of the committee, and I've increasingly taken a humble attitude toward the task force and the committee, realizing that the truth of the matter is we didn't do anything. We identified needs, we advocated for needs, and we were thought partners in figuring out how to accomplish things. We sort of catalyzed action, but we weren't the actors. So I don't think it's up to us to decide how to fund things, with all due respect to Raylene's point. I think it's up to us to identify what the needs are, push for what we think they should be, and then it's up to our representatives to figure out how to do that. out of this committee, out of the Legal and Justice Committee, we looked closely at drug court back in the early years of the task force. We identified that clean and sober housing was a real barrier to success there. We had a broad enough conversation that a couple of people connected with Peace Health and with DOC money, and all of a sudden we were working on rehabbing the recovery house, and we were able to catalyze. We didn't do, but we were able to catalyze a big step in that drug court process. I think one of the reasons we were able to succeed in getting some things accomplished was because there were priorities already established for the task force. We knew we needed a crisis response facility that was in the organic ordinance. We already had a pilot project that translated into expanding into the GRACE program. We were able to work through that. Where I think we bogged down, as Dan correctly noted, was we have, after that initial round of predetermined priorities, we haven't ever really undertaken an analysis or made choices about what priorities should be. The stakeholder advisory group had a great product with the BEGAT group that filled in the gaps in the sequential intercept model, but we've never said which of these gap filler programs would have the biggest bang for the buck and move that to the top. And I think that's what the community is waiting for. They want to see as much bang for the buck as early in the process as possible. And I think that could be our first task, is looking at those possibilities and trying to set some priorities. And then we can talk to the powers that be as forcefully as we need to turn their attention to coming up with plans. And we can be thought partners in developing those plans and making sure they're comprehensive, make sure they include lived experience voices. Anyway, I think that's where this committee, joint and separate, can be appropriate and can have the most impact.
Excellent. Stephen, thank you so much. Dan, I'm going to give you the last word, and then it's going to be back to Raylene.
Okay, sounds good. I'll keep it brief. So I want to address some of the things that have been brought up, including what Stephen just said. So I'm going to try to be succinct here. We are the what and the why people. We are not the how people, if that makes sense. We do not necessarily dictate how things are going to come to fruition. We identify what we think is a priority and why we think it is a priority, including all the programs I had mentioned previously. But it's not incumbent upon us to say how things are going to play out. That's not our role. I kind of want to recenter this collective group to focus in on what Brian had mentioned earlier, of picking a handful of items that we think are priorities, and we can talk about why the priorities and what we want to see. I think we're punching above our weight, to use the euphemism. I think that we are now to the point where many of the things that we talk about, competency restoration, big housing ideas when it comes to transitioning out of jail, things like that, we have to kind of figure out how we want to discuss those things and who our partners are on those items. And I want to apologize, Dr. I think that you are absolutely correct that I failed in my leadership here. I just assume that everyone knows everyone else on the call, and that is not the case. We have new people, and it's important for us to identify who we are. What have we been justice involved? What are our affiliations with whatever governmental or NGO body? I think that that's important. I don't know if there's room in this conversation to do that here today, but I want to end on that comment, and I wanted to acknowledge Dr. Wu that you were correct in that. I failed. I apologize.
I do think, Dan, that we can come up with a way that doesn't take up screen time necessarily, or meeting time necessarily. We could perhaps have bios or something that go out with the packet. But we do need to know who each other are and where we're coming from. So let's push that off to another moment. And I'd like to apologize for taking up so much time, and I would, except it was such a good conversation. I really appreciate everybody's input. I think we've learned a lot from this conversation. And Raylene, do you want to get back to Brian? And then Heather, we were going to go over our 6 points. We may not have time for that today. With your permission, maybe we put that off till next time. So,
if it's okay, Raylene and Dan, I write the presentation I have is really kind of optional, and we can do that next month. I kind of like to see us maybe take action on a couple of these other action items to move process forward. So why don't we just defer mine till the next meeting?
Raylene, do you have any objection to that?
None whatsoever. Thank you, Brian. I did review some of your presentation last night and I thought it was well done. So I look forward to hearing it at the next meeting. In the meantime, for those that aren't aware, if you go down to the participants and you click on the little dots that were with your name, you can actually change your name on the Zoom meeting to help people know who you are. And I agree with Peter that we should probably have a short bio for those that are members, but that might help in the meantime. And Jill Nixon has her hand up, and then we can move forward. Go ahead.
Thank you, Raylene. I just wanted to clarify, Brian, do you want to hold your presentation to the next joint meeting in September or to next month's Behavioral Health Committee?
The joint meeting is fine.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. So we've kind of gone over the committee reconfiguration and focus. If there are other comments on that, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we are going to go on to the ordinance and Justice Project implementation plan continued from the February behavioral health meeting. And I'm going to turn it over to Dan.
Can I get the Jill, can you put up the agenda, please? This is like next to impossible to do from a phone. Hey, Raylene, can you just go over that item? Which one are we on here?
We're on number 4. So
Number 4.
It's the ordinance 2023-39 and the Justice Project implementation plan. Review and discussion from the behavioral health co-chairs.
Okay. I don't see Mike Parker on this call, but I do see Stephen Gockley. Stephen, do you have any thoughts on this?
I don't, Dan. I'm sorry. I didn't really think ahead on this.
Okay. Peter Frazier has been very close to this material. Peter, do you have any opinions, thoughts, want to share?
Nothing prepared. And frankly, I cannot remember what this rollover is from the Behavioral Health Committee. There is, I guess one thing I would say is that communications has been brought up a number of times. I think that voters and taxpayers should know more about what is going on with their Justice Project implementation plan. And we have been having some discussions around how the IPRTF and the county can get word out about what is being done, where we are in building facilities, planning facilities, and programs and projects. So know that is those communications need to happen, and we need to make sure that they are happening. But it's going to take a little time to get there. But we are talking about it, figuring out how to do that. maybe we should go on to the annual report and talk about that if there's time left over. Heather, would you like to take the part of the discussion around the 6 points?
Hey, Heather, before you begin, I just want to chime in real quick here as a city council member and in terms of the city's contributions to the implementation. I think that one thing that we absolutely could be working on as a joint committee is recommendations on how to spend those behavioral health dollars and what those investments can look like starting in a few years. We have some ideas coming up. We have as referenced before, the 23.5-hour crisis relief center. That is absolutely something that we should be chiming in on in terms of what that could look like. And then spending the behavioral health dollars that are associated from the city of Bellingham's contribution, what that could look like. And I know I said before, like we shouldn't get into the how, but I think that there should be some kind of recommendations when it comes to what that, for lack of a better term, program could look like. And what I'm thinking about is investments in either transitional housing and or navigators to help folks that are being released back into our community, and how can they be made successful. So I just want to put a pin in that. We don't talk about it right now, but I do want to maybe Jill have that be a conversation for a later meeting. And I'll go ahead and hand it over to Heather.
I think we were gonna do the annual report agenda item, and then I'll go last if there's time. So I think, is that Jill that's helping us with that one?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. This is not going to be real long today. I just wanted to put the draft annual report before everyone and encourage you to take a look at it and email me any suggested changes and edits that you have to it by probably the end of this week. It will go to steering committee tomorrow, and then it will be finalized into a final draft for IPRTF review and approval on the 24th. So if any of you have any suggestions for changes, please let me know. The current version in your packet is the current version, plus what I emailed you all earlier today, some updates that Perry Mallory suggested. And if you want me to resend those to you, just let me know. Thank you.
I just had one question for clarification on that annual report. Is it really true that the new 23.5-hour center is going to be for adults only? So there's no additional resource for urgent for kids?
There is one in Everson for young children.
Up to what age, Arlene?
What?
Up to
No,
what age?
actually, it's like 18 to 25 range. Or somebody correct me if it's wrong, if I'm saying it wrong, but we have one for youth.
I thought it was a little bit lower that Arlene, maybe like 14 to 21 or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
not positive. And actually, as far as the 23-hour center goes, I'm not exactly sure, but some of the early rules making on that, because it's still going through rules making process at the state, I think they're identifying 18-year-olds and up, because at that age you can check yourself in and talk for yourself. So I think it was maybe 18.
So I just looked it up. It's the Youth Crisis Triage Intensive Outpatient Center, I believe, and it's for individuals aged 18 and under.
18 and under? Okay.
It opened last July, I think, or August.
Yeah, they open in the summertime.
Can't recall though, I don't think it's 24 hours, or is it?
I I don't know.
It says that Touchstone recently submitted a grant application that, if approved, could result in a 16-bed facility for overnight and extended stays up to 90 days. The Youth Resource Center focuses on offering a welcoming and safe place for children and adolescents. In the future, the center hopes to see community organizations and volunteers offer mentorship, lessons, and activities for youth visiting the Everson Center.
Thank you.
For the, not to speak out of turn, but for the portion of our agendas where education is useful, I think it would be lovely to invite them to come make a presentation about what their clinic does and how it serves the community and how we can be supportive and utilize that resource appropriately.
I should say that I work for Touchstone, the business behind it. I teach the interns. I'm a supervisor of interns.
Great. Thank you, Arlene. Should I move forward with my little piece and then Dr. Wu, are you hand down now? Okay. All right. I think I can share. Let me see if I can share. Peter and I, as your new IPRTF co-chairs, have been talking about, as you know, generally what is the scope of the IPRTF and all of these committees, going back to that origin statement. And so in the spirit of wanting to be action oriented and kind of goals focused, Peter and I drafted what are our 6 goals as co-chairs. And we wanted to share this with you as a draft. We want to welcome any feedback, but also for transparency, just share that if you're questioning motivation behind questions we're asking, these are the 6 things that are guiding our work this year. And we'll start making our own action steps too. I can picture underneath each of these 6 goals, what are the 3 things we can do to help advance this? Would love your feedback. I'll read through them. First is we really want to integrate and launch the new J-POP committee well. There's a lot of new stuff this year, new committees, new funding streams, new plans. So we want to help ensure that lack of duplication with the IPRTF scope and make sure there's well-defined and established integrations where appropriate, because there will be work that Justice Oversight Committee, they're going to be responsible for advising on the implementation plan, and clearly there's overlap with all of our committees and IPRTF work. And the way it's designed is that J-POP will be a subcommittee of the IPRTF. So there'll be a lot of helping get that launched well. And all of you will be involved in parts of that, I expect. Second big goal is the communications to public and supporting that. Again, that doesn't mean that we're going to be the ones communicating, but where possible, helping influence and guide and make sure agenda topics support that. Because we want the communications to be sticky and, people talk about this kind of stuff at their dinner tables. So we want to talk about progress and impact. Our third big goal is the data and helping support implementing better systems and meaningful data across systems, but also within systems. So helping to measure the progress and accountability of the work we're doing. Fourth goal is just reinvigorating and reorganizing the IPRTF to evolve to today's needs of oversight and advisory work from community members, as well as to move toward more action and impact. 5 is overall to support progress on that justice implementation plan. And the 6th one is creating and reinforcing a culture of productive engagement and impact and action with task force individuals and county partners. There's a lot of different wordsmithing you all could weigh in on, but I'm just generally curious if you have feedback on these 6 goals or questions for us, as they are very much a draft at this stage. you can say we really dislike all of these goals, or looks good, keep going. Brian, I see your hands up.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to admit that I'm not as educated as I probably should be about J-pop and what components of that might potentially overlap or be linked to the behavioral health committee. I guess I could just do some more reading, but I just wondered, could you comment on that issue perhaps? And is that going to evolve a little bit as time goes on with your new, leadership and some of you and Peter's efforts to kind of maybe redesign how these traditional committees have interacted with the overall task force and then this new J-pop. So.
Peter, you might have more to add, but what I'd start with to answer Brian's question is I think it's going to be a big learning for all of us together. It's a brand new committee. We have people coming on that are going to help seat that committee. And so it might be good to have a little in-depth presentation on what did the ordinance that established J-pop ask J-pop to do, with the question of how can all of us as task force and committee members be supportive and involved in that in appropriate ways. Peter, what would you add to Brian's question to help?
I just, I would support what you just said. It is going to be a great learning experience for all of us. We are going to have facilitators who are going to not only help seat the folks, but to facilitate the work of the J-pop. And there is going to be a lot of overlap, or there's concern that there's going to be a lot of overlap. J-pop is partly, overseeing the work of the advisory work of overseeing the implementation plan, which is, that is our work as well. It is going to be a Venn diagram of, overlapping membership with the IPRTF as well. And we really want to be careful that we're not going to be inefficient with everybody's time and these various groups that we have. And I would include, perhaps the MAC group in that as well. So we don't know what the effect is going to be. We do know what the ordinance says it is to do, and you should read that and consider how it will affect our work. It is going to be a large body. It is not going to break down into committees like this one is. So keep that in mind. I guess that's what I would keep it to for today.
Mike?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, Peter, you pointed something out that was on my mind, because for me, many of us working in the county, we're on multiple committees, and a lot of the work right now is going under that executive order and all the work with the MAC groups. I chair the intervention group, and my earlier comment about sort of being conflicted or confused about these groups is because we're doing all of this other work in these other sectors. So diversion centers, MAT in the field, education, outreach, all of these things are happening via that. And some of these conversations do cross over, because I feel that this group is related to the J-pop. We're going to be putting together some systems and places where people can go to meet those diversions. And I haven't read through the entire implementation plan, but I do that generally. Pete, we're viewing this as a sort of a step-up facility that could have a wide range of abilities to hold people for the involves, hold people for the mental health court, hold people for the drugs, yet not get arrested. And so, yeah, some of those conversations are going on in these other groups, and I'm not sure how to get them all together. But yeah, for guys like us in the county, I mean, this is half our day conversation, usually most every day.
Thank you, Mike.
Maybe a report on it in the future.
We will make sure Jill has a copy of these to send out, and it's an open door for feedback as the year evolves. So thank you for weighing in. and the conversation.
Could I ask another question? Somewhat, maybe a little bit unrelated, but has the county hired staff yet to specifically drive the implementation plan? Or who is from the executive side is leading that effort?
Brian, I can maybe answer your question a little bit. Right now in the executive's office, the new deputy executive, Kayla Schott Bressler, is our primary contact. They are also in the process of working on hiring for the data team positions to run the data component of that. And as Peter mentioned, the Justice Project Planning Team, we're currently in contract negotiation with the facilitator, who is going to be our point of contact between the IPRTF and the JPOP and the county administration and their folks who are going to be running the various aspects of each one of the 15 projects.
Thank you, Jill. Is there any other comments for Heather or Peter on this discussion or previous discussions?
Well, I think it was a good list to start with. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather and Peter, for all the work that you've been doing on this. It is appreciated. And I think we are now to public comment as we're foregoing the other presentation till the next joint committee.
We do have a couple of attendees today attending or joining remotely. Either of you would like to speak to the committees, please virtually raise your hand now. Olivia, go ahead and speak to the committees.
Okay. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. Hi all. I just wanted to introduce myself. I know this is my first time joining. I'm actually not part of the council or anything, but I'm an intern at Cascadia Daily News down in Bellingham, and I was really curious about the kind of work that you guys are doing. So I just kind of wanted to introduce myself and if there are any good contacts to reach out to, if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'd really like to kind of cover some of the initiatives that I know you guys briefly talked about this summer, and just any progress or updates or things that I should be looking out for. So yeah, thank you for letting me introduce myself, and just wanted to stop by.
Thank you, Olivia.
Peter, do you have anyone in the conference room there?
I do, but I've asked and he does not have any public comment today.
Okay, I think that's everything. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to give you a few more minutes of your time back, and have a great afternoon. This is adjourned.